The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine.
Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, we are pleased to present our National Grand Sheik, who will be presenting Escheat tools, marriage licenses, etc. Why trust principles aren't taught to people of color. But before we get started, please click like and share to let someone else know that we are on. Now, without further ado, let's receive our National Grand Sheik.
Islam. We want to discuss a little bit about bottomry instruments. So write that down, bottomry instrument. So it's like bottom with an RY, bottomry instruments. And bottomry instruments are used by the British colony operatives, which are known to you by the political metaphor, the United States. And of course, most of you who already are aware and who are cognate of the political platforms operating at Midgard, Earth, are aware that the United States Corporation is a British colony and still is. And due to the fact that many of the people have been presented with the misconception that the United States Corporation Company registered in Austria, thinking that it is the country relative to the aggregate soil or land operating at central part of North America. That is in fact not true, and is part of the mind control systems and operations that have been going on, particularly since 1861, after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and 1871, February the 2nd, which you all know, when the coup d'etat operatives came out of the closet with their political platform dealing or constructed under the Ku Klux Klan, which is known as the Democratic Party, and what is also known as the Demo platform, etc., contrary to and repugnant to the Constitution for the United States, and repugnant to the obligations to all the treaties superseding the Constitution for the United States that operates on the land, the aggregate land for the true American peoples, etc. Sometimes connotatively referred to as the indigenous people, Aboriginal people, and also connotatively referred to as Indians, but in fact are actually the descendants of the land of the ancient Canaanites, Moabites, in short, Moors. But I want to share with you conceptually some facts so that we can continue in our ongoing activities of the natural people of the land reclaiming their lost estate on multiple levels. And of course, most of you are already aware that the principle of estate expands far beyond what the average natural people have been taught to think that it is, and of course, lacking knowledge of what it actually means extensively and lawfully, including recognition of the denied or suppressed legal processes relative to getting back to the lawful status of the people. We're going to go in the future, we'll be dealing more in depth. Myself and Dr. G have been conversing with some of these things in this past week. And of course, we've had many people call from around the country and from around the continent and from other parts of America in reference to these matters. This is one of the reasons why we're reviewing or regurgitating some of the facts in relationship to the bottomry instruments, and one which we mentioned in our presentment title, marriage license, which is really a bond, etc. And by most people not being aware of the fact that it's actually a bond traded on the stock market, etc., and being under the misconception that it is a divine instrument related to the honorable beauty and innocence of matrimony in the face of our creators and our mothers and fathers and our forefathers, etc., in honor of which the marriage certificate absolutely is not. Unfortunately, many of the people not knowing that it is a corporate state contract that intercedes with the divine nature of the mating of male and female in harmony with divine laws of nature, and is actually more akin to and more aligned with human trafficking and sales. And of course, most people are not aware of the fact that the marriage license was constructed mainly by the Daughters of the American Revolution. So write this down. The marriage license was constructed by the Daughters of the American Revolution for the Bishopric of Rome in relationship to their operative mercenary contractual operations for the popes of Rome, who are indeed the Vatican Order and the owners of the United States Corporation Company. And via that instrument, all in relationship to the bottomry instrument, particularly the one that you know as a marriage license, but this goes beyond the marriage license, goes into other instrumentalities too, which would include birth certificates, CDLs, driver's licenses, etc., social security cards with the inclusive of the QSIC number that you will see on the on the social security cards, which are used according to the sectoral religion. And they're fixed contracts. There are also what you would call adhesion contracts. So write that down. Adhesion contract is very important for you to have a proper concept of what an adhesion contract is. An adhesion contract is, in its nature, a contract that actually on its face is misrepresented to other obligations, duties, debts, and what you would call abandonments of rights and liberties that are not said or spoken. Say, for instance, a member of the clergy would say to participants in the bottomry instrument known as a marriage license, and they will make statements along this line. And remember this as you hear this statement. By the power vested in me by the state of Delaware, I pronounce you man and wife. You'll hear those statements according to the corporate state that the people may be operating in those particular jurisdictions. And keep in mind that those particular jurisdictions are abstracts on paper connected to and related to corporate entities, constructs on paper, having nothing at all to do with the aggregate land, L-A-N-D, the aggregate soil, having nothing whatsoever to do with the aggregate soil. And so it's important for people to have a concept, a true concept of jurisdictional placements distinguished from organic land placements or geographic territorial placements. From a political perspective and fact and reality, it's also vital that the people are very clear to make the distinction between, as an example, the political metaphor, as an example, state of Delaware, state of Pennsylvania, state of New Jersey, distinguished from the political metaphor, Delaware State Republic, Pennsylvania State Commonwealth, New Jersey State Republic. So when you hear Pennsylvania State Commonwealth, that is a political metaphor that relates to the legitimate operations by treaty and constitution on the aggregate land, distinguished from human trafficking operations by corporate venues via state of Pennsylvania, etc., or state of Delaware, or state of New Jersey, or any of the states of entity constructs that have been operate jurisdictionally, exercising civil jurisdictional powers de facto on the land, particularly since 1861, and particularly more distinctly since 1871, February 2nd, dealing with what is known as the U.S. democracy also. I would like to share with you, for those of you who didn't, or it never dawned on you, why clergy members, when they exercise the bottomry instrument, which they are what you would call a third party facet operative, actually a fourth party operative, or you might call an interloper operative in the operations. And this would be known as their true oath. Now, the concepts that most people would have, that when the sectal member of the clergy says, by the power vested in me by the state of Delaware, I pronounce you man and wife, it does not dawn on the average person, because they're usually concerned or involved with going through the beauty of the ceremony, all of the finance that is spent, all of the happy people and family members that are around, and they're waiting for the reception, etc., and they're not paying attention to the details of what is stated. So when the clergy member of the Roman Curia says, by the power vested in me by the state of Delaware, I pronounce you man and wife, it doesn't dawn on the participants that matrimonial contract power is vested by the corporate state, having nothing to do with the divine creator, Allah, Yahweh, Harold Brahms, the Buddha, etc., Confucius, or any of the divine images or the metaphors or the anthropomorphic positions of the prophets, or Prophet Muhammad, etc., etc., that people may use in their different religious positions. There's an assumption that it is a pathway to what we would refer to as the divine, the creator, Allah, God, etc., those concepts. And of course, they need to be aware of the fact that while the people in general are trained from childhood to assume that when the clergy says the word God, that they're making reference to the creator or the source of life for all of us, etc., when in fact they're actually talking about the vested power of the owners of the corporate state that vest their power by delegation of the bishopric via this Roman curia member who would hold the role of the man of the cloth, etc. And so I will share with you from the congressional records, because remember, even these people that you have assumed were just political heads, quote unquote, representing people or the land. Actually, they're representatives for the corporate operations of the popes of Rome through the bishopric order and through the United States Corporation Company, the states of political construct jurisdictions, and the municipalities, townships, and boroughs under admiralty, maritime, etc., rules of booty and prize. And so the bottomry instrument known as the marriage license would come under the secret oath of the clergy to the popes of Rome. And I'll share with you what most of you are already aware of. But however, for those of you who are not aware of this, I will share with you this for you to also recognize the connection, actual and factual, between the clergy that you thought loved Jesus, God, Allah, etc., and the popes of Rome, etc., contrary to what has been told to you, i.e., and this would also show you the misrepresentation of their positions with the people at large, as well as their misrepresentations of themselves and the operations of these contractual adhesion instrumentalities known as bottomry instruments, which would include the marriage certificates and birth certificates, etc., and driver's licenses, etc. So I'll share with you and do your own research. This will be available to you for those of you who have libraries, which you should have. You can do this research in your own library, and you can also go into the congressional records for the United States Corporation Company and find this document yourself. And those of you who over the last year or two have acquired the study drive, flash drive from Dr. Naila in the House of Reawakening Minds, you would have this congressional record from the Senate on that flash drive, and it is known as the Secret Treaty of Verona. And so many of you are already aware of this, but for those of you who are not aware and who have been participating with instrumentalities from the corporate state to know the truth about what is happening with you, with your estate, in relationship to these people that you assumed that were dealing with you in honor, and they actually were not dealing with you in honor, never were, and are not. So I'm going to go from the congressional records registered in the House of Representatives, the congressional record, and the Senate extract from the 1916 operations of the corporation operations for the United States Corporation Company. Senator Owen, I wish to put in the record the Secret Treaty of Verona, quote unquote, of November 22nd, 1822, showing what the ancient conflict is between the rule of the few and the rule of the many. I wish to call the attention of the Senate to this treaty because it is the threat of this treaty which was the basis of the quote-unquote Monroe Doctrine. It throws a powerful white light upon the conflict between monarchical government and government by the people. The Holy Alliance, under the influence of Metternich, the Premier of Austria, in 1822, issued this remarkable secret document, Secret Treaty of Verona. Now, note, you all, that the treaty has 7 sections, but I'm going to read up until Article 3 for the sake of our presentment tonight. Secret Treaty of Verona, American Diplomatic Code, 1778 to 1884, Volume 2, Elliot, page 179. The undersigned specially authorized to make some additions to the Treaty of the Holy Alliance after having exchanged their respective credentials, have agreed as follows. Article 1. The high contracting powers being convinced that the system of representative government is equally as incompatible with the monarchical principles as the maxim of the sovereignty of the people with the divine right, engage mutually in the most solemn manner to use all that their efforts to put an end to the system of representative governments in whatever country it may exist in Europe, and to prevent it being introduced to those countries where it is not yet known. Article 2. As it cannot be doubted that the liberty of the press is the most powerful means used by the pretended supporters of the rights of nations to the detriment of those princes, the high contracting parties promise reciprocally to adopt all proper measures to suppress it, not only in their own states, but also in the rest of Europe. Article 3, and pay close attention to Article 3, because this is the oath that all the clergy that have been telling you, by the power vested in me by the state of Delaware, I do pronounce you man and wife, etc. This is their oath. It's not to Allah, it's not to Prophet Muhammad, it's not to Yeshua, it's not to the Jesus image, it is not to any of the prophets, it is not to anything divine, it is to the popes of Rome. Hear the following. Article 3, Secret Treaty of Verona, Oath of the Clergies. Convinced that the principles of religion contribute most powerfully to keep nations in the state of passive obedience, which they owe to their princes. The high contracting parties declare it to be their intention to sustain in their respective states those measures which the clergy may adopt with the aim of ameliorating their own interests, intimately connected with the preservation of the authority of the princes, and the contracting powers join in offering their thanks to the Pope for what he has already done for them, and solicit his constant cooperation in their views of submitting the nations. So Article 3, and that's the secret oath that the clergy have to the popes of Rome while going in houses that they told you are houses of God and have been promoting Jesus and the other prophets to the face of the people, but in secret, their pledge and their allegiance and their fidelity is pledged to the Pope of Rome, and they themselves are secret clergy members of the bishopric of Rome. That goes for the Eastern churches, the Orthodox churches, and the Protestant churches. This is why you hear them make this statement. By the power vested in me by the state of Delaware, I pronounce you man and wife. So they adhered you to the popes of Rome under their human trafficking, and the people thought their pledge was to the Creator, God, or the source, etc. And indeed, it was not. That's an adhesion contract. It's a bottomry instrument, totally misrepresented, and the negative spirit or energy is cast with that instrumentality. And by that instrumentality, the corporate state claims control of the eggs in the womb, unhatched, and then later with the birth certificates, they claim the eggs that do hatch, and they're all claimed by the popes of Rome through the bishopric with the help of your corner store clergy, who most of whom have a skull and bones agreement, which you have heard of, known as a 501c3 clergy agreement. This is why they don't talk about these things to the public. And this is also why most of them will pretend to have no knowledge of what I just exposed to you. However, it's incumbent upon you, the people yourselves, to begin to practice going back into the principle of learning and reading and researching for yourselves to comprehend fundamental contract principles and comprehend the fact and know the fact that the marriage license is an adhesion contract to the Pope of Rome, having nothing to do at all with divinity whatsoever. And in many factors, and it's very often, this is again why unknown to most people that enter into these adhesion contracts, who later in the experiences of their relationships may become confused when commercial mercenary operatives operating under Article 39 of police powers comes into their homes and takes their children, even without court orders, and people have problems claiming their children because they are assuming that the children are theirs, not knowing that the clergy are part of the network of not saving souls, but collecting souls for the popes of Rome. And one of those instrumentalities is the misrepresented marriage certificate. It is a bottomry instrument. It is an adhesion contract. It is misrepresented, and it is constructed for human trafficking. And from its root, it actually sets a negative spirit in the otherwise, without it, divine relationship between man and woman. Contrary to nature, contrary to divinity, contrary to the spirit of love, but absolutely connected to human trafficking on multiple levels, as well as an instrument used to escheat all future inheritances and the estates of people. That's a fact. Write it down. Any questions?
I'm just trying to deal with this. No, that's one.
So, as a reminder, for many of you who are listening, who you want to do some back research on this, and we'll do this in the future because we were also talking earlier about expanding on the corruption, the spirit of corruption done by the priesthood in relationship to the marriage certificate. And I say this absolutely. Do not confuse the marriage certificate and the operations around it with the natural matrimony operations of love and union between man and woman in nature. They are not partners at all. And in the future, when we're going to go into this more in depth, this particular instrumentality of adhesion contract in the future, and when we do that, we'll go into the commercial mercenary operations of Article 39 and in detail, and we'll bring it out and show it to you, etc. So you'll know why people that you thought were law officers, they're actually commercial mercenaries for the popes of Rome, and this is why they usually send them. You commonly know them as police, members of the Fraternal Order of Police, and they go and they kidnap children from women, and women are denied due process or the claim of their own children because there's an assumption, rightful, divinely, by the women that she produced that child come from her womb, and then these operatives from the corporate state arbitrarily take children at will from their homes under the Christian black codes, under the authority of the states of corporations, which the people are assuming are law officers when they're really contractual enforcers, commercial mercenaries for the secret treaty of Verona, pretending to be officers, i.e., because when you say officer, you're implying that that person or that being is a constitutionally constructed and elected representative in harmony with treaties and constitutions on behalf of the people, when that is absolutely not true and is absolutely the opposite. They're in power by the corporate state operatives actually to regulate the actual physical human capital, just as they regulate cattle, etc. And it absolutely operates from that perspective. Relative to the instrumentality known as the marriage license, we'll go into details more with you in the future in relationship to that instrumentality. Also, some details into fundamental contract law and rebuttal of contract and reversion or rescission of signature in relationship to the bottomry instruments which have been misrepresented to the people and has actually been over the years creating more damage both spiritually, politically, economically, and relative to heritability than most people have ever assumed those instruments to be. And they've been enforced violently against women. And but again, you must have a concept of your right of reversion of estate too. And this is again why trust law or the principles of trust law are not taught to our people. And the misconceptions of the obligations of these contracts to the corporate state is an assumed jurisdictional position in relationship to their viewing of the people at large and their activities on how they respond to you, how they treat you, etc., and also in relationship to what they would call states' arguments in relationship to women who are trying to retrieve their kidnapped children from these beings who you assumed and emphasized assumed were authority when actually they're human traffickers. And that marriage license has much to do with it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Assuming when you say the marriage license is actually a signing over of the eggs, the unfertilized eggs, what?
But that's not presented.
Wait a minute. Let me finish. What does that mean in terms of an unmarried woman who has a child? Is it going back to when whoever in her lineage was last married that gave her? And
this is your answer to that.
Yeah.
So when you look into Christian Black codes of 1724, adopted into all the states of the corporate states, etc., you will see that the condition of the child is condition of the mother. And also you answer your own question by being aware of the fact that the condition of the child is condition of the mother. And you also recognize when you go into the principle of them establishing the birth certificate to make claim on the eggs that hatch. So from initially, those de facto, their claim is on the eggs before hatching, i.e. the womb of the women, etc. And then for the ones that hatch, logically, if one has or has been registered at Seed and Company with a birth certificate, which is again why very often they intimidate women and don't let them out of the hospitals unless they sign a birth certificate, because they create the bond with that. And so even if the woman is not married, they also make an assumption claim. And this is what is called assumed jurisdiction. That would be in personam jurisdiction. So write that down, you all. In personam jurisdiction. You can look that up in your law book, etc. We won't go into that because we don't want to expand the past that and change the subject matter, but that's also operative relative also to the jurisdictional powers, though de facto, referencing subject matter jurisdiction. So you want to look at it that. So they're operating what is known as assumed jurisdiction, and logically, and it's not necessarily logically, but by circumstance of the misinformation that people operate their lives with, most women don't have are not aware of their right of reversion of estate. They're not aware of their right to rebut properly disassociation or not standing as surety for the corporate state operations or operators, etc. And then this is also why they have been promoting falsely the U.S. citizen prospect to the people, getting them to say, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" People say yes, and there's an assumed jurisdiction. Because at that point, when people don't know, when say one of the Roman Curia members operating in an agency, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" and you respond yes, you just said to them that you are their stock, and it has nothing to do with what people think it does in relationship to the assumption of what citizenship means. That's the assumed jurisdiction. And then, of course, at that time, the being is considered state board, and at that time, this is again why, as soon as that is established, although it's still an adhesion, why they start being what you call very abusive with the people, telling them to shut up and telling them they can't speak, and then telling them you can't talk unless you have a lawyer. Now that's another member of the Roman Curia who operative who constructed with the Daughters of the American Revolution the marriage certificate bond. And so that person is bonded, and it never dawns on them that they're operating from the bond. They're not, the being that's standing before them is what you would call ward and has no even right to talk. And so this is the unfortunate situation where we have, like you say, women that are not married, where they trap them later with the birth certificate.
So what, if anything, do the Mormons have to do with the cataloging of all births? I was told that they have a record of, they have all of the records. Yes. We were going cross country, and we passed the place.
Particularly in the West, in the Utah area, because we got to remember the Mormons, the hybrid European Mormons, took over a lot of the gold of the Moors, which is why they refer to themselves as Moor men. And that people look at that as a religion, a religious sect. It's actually a religious sect of the Constantine order. However, they're claiming the areas, the west areas, because a lot of our gold was in that area. And of course, because the people themselves are the gold or the heirs, which is why the birth certificate records are in those big supercomputers in the Utah area. And so the other issue, by them being presented to the masses as, what you call a semi-secluded religious operation of people, it appears on the surface innocent. And, because as soon as you say religion, people start thinking the divine creator.
Right.
As soon as you say God, it doesn't dawn on the people, government, ordinance departments. They're thinking the creator. Around with no qualifications, because the masses are trained that God, the word God, is the name of the creator, when actually it's a political designation, not specifically dealing with what you call the higher self or the lower self, but it is just a political metaphor, not unlike the word president or manager or senator or minister. Any of those words is a prerequisite, and if there's no attribute added to it, as an example, if you say God Yahweh, or God Allah, then that must be qualified, because the word God could mean even Satan or the demons. And just like, for instance, like the bishopric priesthood will tell the people, Satan is the god of this world, and so when they throw the word God around, you don't know which one they're presenting you for. And I guarantee you, 90% of them are presenting you to the lower self. Of course, you look at the conditions of Midgard, that tells you everything. If a carpenter comes to fix your house and after 20, 30 years, your house still broke, if you think that person's a carpenter, that's your choice. And I say, for all the claimed spirituality of our people, particularly in general, the conditions of our people, all you need to do is look at our families, our relationships, our communities, with our assumed concepts of pseudo divinity in relationship to these instrumentalities presented by the bishopric, The conditions of the community tells you everything. However, you can delude yourself into thinking that you've been operating in some divine order. That's your choice. However, the evidence proves to the contrary. And I know truth is uncomfortable, but if we're going to deal with the problems that have been facing our people and our communities, we must start being honest about the reality of results. Because you can't keep having massive levels of failure, disorder, disruption, disassociation, pain, misery, breakup, poverty in a community that is in actuality operating divinely. That doesn't compute. However, the fact of the matter is we've been assuming ourselves to be super duper spiritual because we go to churches, mosques, and synagogues for generations, and the conditions of our families, etc., don't reflect that. Not really. But we like to think of ourselves as super duper special. However, the fact of the matter is that we've been operating under bottomry contracts owned by the Bishopric of Rome, and they've been regulating our families and our lives to their own malleable hands, and molding the social order and orders that we've been suffering to live under for generations. And it has not been good, so don't lie.
Here's a comment from Shine 9 Bay. I'm just going back. She says, my logic as a child, which came with heavy crucifixion, was the question: if love is free and universal, then why do I need a contract via a marriage certificate?
Easily. Now you just by what you just said, because keep in mind that common sense, and usually common sense is exercised by children until we interfere with our corruption. Common sense is in harmony with common law, and the Constitution for the United States, the original Republic order, is related to the support and the uplifting of allodial principles or the rights unalienable or unlicensed, because lien means license or to pay or to apply, etc., or privilege distinguished from that which is unliened, etc. So unalienable rights, or what people sometimes you hear them say unalienable rights, are the opposite of privileges or licenses, and are in fact akin to what is known as birthright, or that which is harmonic with divinity, or that which is in divine nature. And therefore, that which is divine is not contaminated with adhesion contracts or what you would call a compelling spirit, or some compelling transfer of goods or purposes under false pretenses, and definitely not under an adhesion contract with a marriage license. Absolutely is in contradiction to divine laws of nature, does not represent or present any platform where men and women are sold to each other via the corporate state on behalf of the popes of Rome through the instrumentalities and bottom instruments set forth by the daughters of the American Revolution and perpetrated against the people under the guise of Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, etc., to the people, when they're actually collecting lives and souls and inheritances for the popes of Rome under the guise of mostly and most commonly using Jesus as a front, etc., when it's actually a human trafficking instrumentality, i.e. a bottomry instrument, and totally misrepresented. Uncomfortable truth, but that's the fact.
So here's another comment / question from Cuz I Said So. So they made up this notion of illegitimacy of your children?
Exactly. That is made up based in imposing or coercing people to get a marriage license, when the fact of the matter is love and the reproduction of a child constitutes by nature matrimony. However, the agreement between man and woman and their family, etc., relative to the natural matrimony and the witnessing of the matrimony for harmonies in the society is in harmony with nature and does not constitute selling humans to each other under a third party interloper contractor who created those instrumentalities for the stock market, their stock market, and in fact, with the later, while being processed, allonges that are attached to that instrumentality on the stock market issued from 55 Water Street at New York. And that's the fact. So common sense would tell you that's in violation of nature. But most people are so busy going about their everyday lives, and then they're assuming that these things are legally required by divine law. No, they're legally required by the popes of Rome for their human trafficking purposes, and also for Escheat operations and all future estate operations, or what you call the work life and the heritability life of the beings in contract with the corporate state, presented by their agents known as the clergy, and considered U.S. stock. And that is indeed what the U.S. Treasury bonds are also constructed on. And for those of you who are a little bit more aware, because a lot of people, by doing research and many people trying to reclaim their birthright in many different venues, etc., you will see across the land and actually across the world, even in other political jurisdictions where people who are becoming somewhat aware are going through different processes of claiming or trying to claim a holder in due course in relationship to things that they've heard in relationship to the quote unquote birth certificates. So when you see people moving in those directions, they're to a great degree aware of the adhesion contractual operations, but you'll notice that hardly anybody mentions the marriage certificate superseding the birth certificate. That's true. And the other deal of it is, particularly since when the United States corporation owners went bankrupt in the late 20s, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, CEO for the United States Corporation Company, known as U.S. President, he pledged the birth certificates to again reestablish a surety basis for their instruments and their fiat currency operations as they had gone bankrupt. And this is where you often hear them talk about the so-called banking holiday for the U.S. corporation. But that's when they pledged the birth certificates, because the nations of the earth, they had multiplied, or what you call compounded or fractionalized, write that down, fractionalized the marriage certificates to such a degree that the treasury bonds constructed on them or leaned on them were weakened, which has much to do with the treasury bonds since World War II, particularly not being what you call valid or accepted. And the agreements also that was made with the by the clergy and by the Senate and the corporate overseers, i.e. the so-called Congress, House of Representatives, and the senators for the United States Service Corporation Company, who has still been falsely presenting themselves as quote unquote a legitimate government when actually they're overseers and they are board of directors for the United States Corporation Company, which is a British colony still, etc. Backing the debt, their debt, or renewing new surety instrumentalities with the birth certificate. So when you look at the birth certificate issue, you look at the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration all around those matters, etc. However, don't forget the marriage certificates which superseded them. and that those instrumentalities are still have allonges attached to them and are still moved through seed and company for the United States Corporation Company. This has, no bearing in the or what you call in to the current operations, because most of what's happening now is that the nations of the earth are starting to reject the U.S. Treasury bonds, etc. Also, which were leaned by the birth certificates. The owners of the United States Corporation, as most of you will find when you do research, try to renew them and try to fractionalize them again, which was denied them. And so you'll see those operations when you do research in the congressional records relative to around 2013. And this is the period of time where Pope Francis did the motu proprio, which we've mentioned to you multiple times, and many of you who've already done your research are already aware of that. And also, after 2013, you're most of you are already aware of the civil orders correspondence between Pope Francis and Barack H. Obama, which we also shared with you, and which you will also find on the flash drive that we've shared with you to bring your cognizance and your consciousness up a few notches, etc. But for the most part, it's really from an operative point of view, it is really to help people remove the illusion that permeates our communities, particularly thinking that the United States Corporation is the aggregate physical land country or organic, which it is not and has not been. And what they've been doing, the owners in their bankruptcy, they have been what is obvious and what has been obvious, trying to convert the people's estates to back their private debt and bankruptcy. Now, keep this in mind also, politically and operatively, from a principle of corporation operations and a principle of international law, they actually have no business nor any right lawfully nor legally to still be in operation. And that's a fact. And however, they're still extorting taxes from the people under the fictional guise of being their government fraud. They're still passing the birth certificates and the marriage certificates around the world in backing so-called debt, fraud, etc. And logically, with most people not being aware of the chicanery, the misrepresentation, and the corruption of the marriage certificates, birth certificates, driver's licenses, and all these other instrumentalities, CDLs, etc., that they've been using to back their private debt, etc., even though the rest of the civilized world has been rejecting these instrumentalities as sureties to back the U.S. corporation debt, which is, again, while you're having these international trade problems now that you're looking at. So you may be encouraged to look at what you would call physical instrumentality or object or manufactured object trade, when you really have to comprehend that the whole foundation of backing U.S. corporation sureties, etc., is actually human capital, and actually always has been. And the marriage certificate is one of the major instrumentalities. So bringing this up to you is to encourage you all to look at these things more seriously and to start taking control of your lives and to start making conscious and intelligent statements and instruments and claims of reversion of estate, which we've been telling you for years to do. And many of you who are conscious of these operations have been declaring your nationality as a reversion of estate, and doing different things to to state for the public record in proclamation in different formats a reversion of a state, knowing that the United States Corporation Company operatives are actually organized criminal cartel. And that's absolutely the truth. And knowing that you would spend no more time and no more efforts of following any paradigm presented to you by anybody arguing racism and prejudice, which is one of the mind control paradigms that was created to divert the people from the rightful issue or argument of human trafficking, etc., which is really what your problem has been. And it's cheating of your estate, which is really the true root of the problem. And the issue of the marriage certificate as a subject matter for the moment, etc., is just one of the instrumentalities used by owners and regulators and administrative clerks and the clergy of the operative state of Delaware and the municipalities under that jurisdiction, and the other corporate state of institutions and entities, all of whom and all of which are lawfully bankrupt, etc., who are continuing to commit crimes against humanity with not only these instrumentalities, but with their on different multiple levels enforcing the adhesion contracts assigned to and attached to these instrumentalities, all of which have been absolutely misrepresented to the people. And that's the truth. However, because there's also people among our own who have been operating, as you all know, in platforms known as so-called conscious community, etc., rather than also help liberate our people by telling the truth, or also many of them start getting involved in the lives of different people with scams to get a few, always trying to get in your pockets for a few thousand notes. They're going to sign some writs for you, etc. And these are opportunists and parasitic people, most of whom have some association with the Bar Association in one format or another. And instead of trying to liberate our people, are still right along with the hybrid priesthood, exploiting the injuries of our people rather than telling the truth, mainly because most of them produce nothing either. And so because human trafficking has been a great part of the economic currency system operating at North America for generations, many people's jobs have been in some format constructed or tied to these different levels of exploitation. And rather than go into their divine mind and start being creative and starting helping to eliminate the corruption of the priesthood, they make up little platforms disguised as different opportunities within the Moorish movement, which is set for the uplifting of fallen humanity and the liberation of humanity. They will use these platforms or other platforms that are put in place to liberate the people. They will find little niches within the platforms to actually continue to exploit the people by trying to get into your pockets. When the fact of the matter is, unalienable rights cannot be leaned. So be aware of people that keep trying to get in your pockets. It does not mean that a servant's not worthy of his hire, etc. It does not mean that you don't support platforms that they're working to help liberate humanity. However, fundamental operations of liberation has more to do with you being cognate and taking responsibility of your lives, and by people telling you the truth that most of your institutions or agencies that have been operating at North America are rooted in human trafficking and human misery. In other words, what they've done and what they do is, whether you're talking educationally whether you're talking physical health, whether you're talking food, whether you're talking political economics, social engineering, almost all the institutions operating under the venues of the states of entities, etc., are placed in or constructed in such a way to create problems and then exploit the people, making heavy cost of them trying to get out of the injury caused by these misrepresented jurisdictions, one of which in the subject matter tonight is the marriage certificate that has other adhesions that were not told to you at all. So beware of people, and many people who are conscious, going along with the Bar Association trying to exploit our people and the problems that they're having, whether it's with the Inquisition Revenue Service, which is defunct and still operative, and it was blended, or what you call brought into the corporate U.S. Treasury to try to increase their powers, etc. Keep in mind they're bankrupt, etc. And you even have some so-called conscious Moors who have been even telling other Moors in relationship to the IRS to pay them, etc., while knowing that they're bankrupt, and then trying to get $3,400 from them out their pockets, while calling themselves some kind of a Moorish operation. Fraud, fraud, fraud. And it's been going on. And so we're making you aware of these things so you can watch that the enemies are not just among the hybrids. This is why Drawley warned the Moors. He said, be careful, Moors. Some of your own brothers and sisters will be trying to put you back into slavery. And you know the slavery is connotated. However, the more you comprehend and more you have comprehension of how the system of the United States Corporation and its subcategory jurisdictions, i.e., that means the state of Delaware, the state of New Jersey, state of Pennsylvania, state of North Carolina, state of California, etc., all of these are defunct, bankrupt, or subcategory or de facto political platforms, separate from and not to be confused with the aggregate physical land, which you have been falsely told that they are. They have no lawful aggregate land, or what was called territorial jurisdiction. That's a fact. And they've been using the marriage certificates, the birth certificates, the driver's licenses, etc., to back their private debt of the clergy and the popes of Rome and the private slush funds of the board of directors that you have been knowing as congressmen and senators and mayors and governors, etc., of the states of corporations, with the help of their Roman Curia operative members known as the clergy, whose oath I read to you in the Secret Treaty of Verona. And as a reminder of you all who are listening tonight, go back to the congressional records, read Article 3. So that's all your clergy. So if you say, oh no, I'm Protestant and I'm not this and I'm not that, all of them have this secret oath. They all come under the Vatican, and all the corporate entities come under the Vatican. That's a fact. Do your research. However, we're informing you so that you can, by your own will, start rejecting Rome and start, how you might say, loving Allah, loving Jesus, etc., loving the prophets like you've been claiming to do, and start rejecting Rome, who's actually been using humans as collateral to back their private corporate debt. However, their political platform is bankrupt. It has much to do with the political reflections that you see taking place now at North America and reflected around the world. That's a fact, not an opinion. Be aware.
Question?
Yes, go ahead.
This is from Laurel Rael. Can a man file a notice of claim on his wife and children to override any claim? And then, and also, let's add the other. if we
One
create,
question at a time.
was the same person? It's the same.
It's still one question at a time.
Okay.
Because it blends.
All right.
Because remember, questions are actually involve a lot of other people. This is the position. Now, divinely, morally, of course. However, politically, the condition of the being stated as a ward of the state that every man, woman, and child must confess their own. The condition of the child, condition of the mother. I would encourage you to have the mother or herself, she must honor her mothers and fathers as you have. Because in law and at law, the honor of or the right of a state and liberties, etc., and inheritances, this relative to heritability, it must be confessed by the being themselves. You can't confess it for her. Unfortunately, that is in fact an ancient rule. And so when you're talking about what is known as the common law and common sense, etc., you must assume also that in according to assumed jurisdiction, that she is, as you would say, your wife, etc., that wifery, if it's based in the marriage certificate, the jurisdictional claim is already abdicated unless you reverse that also. And this is back to why over the years we've been encouraging people to understand and comprehend the meaning, political meaning of nationalization, which is more expansive than most people are told it is. For it is in its nature an actual reversion of a state. And anyone by law who fails to profess, or what can be said from a law position, a status position, to profess or to pronounce it or to proclaim publicly the honor of their mothers and fathers, have by rule of political operations abandoned their right of a state. And this is also what they're operating on. So keep in mind the instruments, i.e. marriage certificates, they're all de facto. However, from an assumed jurisdictional position, you must rebut them publicly. And I would suggest that you look at that area while making that claim, etc. Because it's sort of like from a rule of status, you can't liberate a being who themselves don't want to be liberated. They have a right to be in servitude if they choose to. And because in another way, you can kind of look at, for those of you who are familiar with the Septuaginta or the Bible, which comes from old African law, even though the hybrid Europeans have tampered with it, there still are books. Keep that in mind. Not just the Quran and the Torah. The Bible is also our books. That's still Berber culture. That's African culture. And the principles, the moral principles that are rooted in that Bible are African culture. And so the principle of right of inheritance is that every man, woman, and child must confess their own and worship under their own vine and fig tree. In a principle of political operations, that position of that honor is a right of inheritance. And absent of that honor, the being or the otherwise heir has no right of inheritance. That area is where the hybrid Europeans have been claiming what you would call abandonment and the wardship tenures operations via their operations of Escheat, which is really what they've been doing. And this is again why they don't teach trust law, because our people aren't even aware that the United States Corporation Company and its operatives who have been pretending to be a government, a legitimate government, when they're actually illegitimate, and they're an imposter operations. They've been declaring that particularly the people, the Aboriginal people of the land, have abandoned their estates by claiming to be Negroes, blacks, and coloreds, which have nothing to do with the pedigree or the history of Asiatic African people, but were indeed nom de guerre brand systems set forth by hybrid Europeans operating under colonial powers at North America and presenting these nom de guerre tags or quote unquote brands as identities. And by the people not rebutting them, assumed jurisdiction was established for the record. which is why they refer collectively to such persons having no birthright as quote unquote people of color. Now, for those of you who have been tricked by so-called conscious people in your community telling you that people of color is sort of like a statement that gives honor to African people of descent or African descent, let me go to law and show you what they know, what they have not been telling you. Let me just take a moment and go to Dr. G's library, and this is just a small part of it. But I want you to wait. I want you to see the shirt.
They can't see it.
Oh well. Anyway, so let me go into the law book, and
unfortunately,
that's fine.
We'll figure it out.
But we're sharing. Now, this would be not just the current, but keep in mind past tense, because remember, jurisprudence is the science that treats of positive law, coming from the ancient Sabian or Sabian Moors, and Almoravids and Almoravides, etc., and the different Moorish tribes of Iberia. And Iberia is later known to you in history as Europe, etc. So let's go into the ancient and modern principle of people of color so that you will have a clear conception of what it actually means, contrary to what you've been falsely told by so-called persons that you've trusted, referred to as people of color. But I want to show you, but before we go, I want to show you my House of Reawakening Mind shirt. Here we come.
We'll put up the picture.
Yes. And my custom crown the brother made for me.
Oh yeah.
Hooey.
All right.
All right.
We'll put it up.
So many of you have been trained under what is known as nom de guerre, and so when you hear people making statements like people of color, many of you thought that was a term of endearment for people of African descent, when in fact it is in fact anti-human, and in fact a political term constructively applied to people of Northwest Africa, Northwest of Mexico, the Temple of the Moon and Sun, known to you as North America, etc., under the political jurisdiction operations of the United States Service Corporation Company, operating under the secret treaty of Verona for the Bishopric of Rome and the Vatican, to which they are fidelity operatives, etc. So here's what color actually means in law when they make reference to humans, etc. Color is an appearance, a semblance, or a simulacrum as distinguished from that which is real, a prima facie or apparent right, hence a deceptive appearance, a plausible assumed exterior concealing a lack of reality, a disguise or pretext. Now I'm going to go into colored persons. Law. Black's Law Dictionary of Ancient and Modern Jurisprudence. This rule is ancient and it is modern. The law principle did not change. It still stands today. Colored. This is page 332. Colored. By common usage in America, this term, as used in such phrases as quote unquote colored persons, quote unquote the colored race, quote unquote colored men, and the like, is used to designate Negroes or persons of the African race, including all persons of mixed blood descended from Negro ancestry. And then it gives you law case for reference. But where the state constitution provided for separate schools For the white and colored races, the term quote unquote white race was held to be limited to the Caucasian race, and the term quote unquote colored races to embrace all others. And then it gives you case reference such as Rice versus Gonlum, etc. 139, Mississippi. Now, the term colored people, colored persons, colored men, colored race, it also has been held that there is no legal, technical signification to the phrase, quote unquote, colored person, which the courts are bound judicially to know. So as you can see, it is a fraud, and it has been totally misrepresented to our people. And when you have so-called conscious people promoting among your children, i.e., we're people of color, they have just called you an artificial person, i.e., or corporate entity, thus civil iter mortuus, i.e., among the dead. That's why Prophet Noble Ali said you're not Negro, black, or colored people. And this is why he talked from a sociological perspective, not from an etymological perspective, when he says black, according to science, means death. And so you're talking about the political science of social engineering operating at North America under the principles of occupation or birthright theft. And thus, they've been living off your virtues for generations. And this is why miseducation is so important as a political tool to affect a political foundation that the corporate state operatives and owners can escheat your estate. Thus, that's why in the Christian Black Codes of 1724, adopted into all the states, 1868, etc., why the condition of the children are the condition of the mother. Therefore, all women should know the truth of the political platforms that they've been supporting blindly, including all the clergy who actually have fidelity to the popes of Rome, not to Jesus, and that we have been funding our own slavery. And the marriage bottomry instrument is one of those instruments. That's a fact. Unfortunate, but true. However, you can honor your mothers and fathers, but you're going to have to reject Rome. And another thing, that for those of you who are familiar with the Bible, you can look at Isaiah 64 in that area and read that. In the area where it says, I hold my hand out all the day long to a hard-hearted and rebellious people who are not called by my name. When they repent from their sinful ways, I will hear from heaven and heal their land. Land. Go to your law books and look up land and see how extensive it is, which would include all of your estates and all your rights of inheritances, corporal and incorporeal, and thus your right of claim to your own property and your offspring, i.e., your seed, your children. You must step out of Rome's venues and out of Rome's political jurisdiction back into your own. On a political civil level that covers that whole area of political operations is called universally nationalization. It is far more than most people have been telling you who have been mentioning the word nationalization. And it also is important for you to comprehend, understand, and overstand and understand the nature of it, so that you can counter opportunists on your side who have been trying to get into people's pockets relative to your rights of estate or reversion of estate, or some false claim of debt coming from the IRS or any of the Pope's instrumentalities of defunct and bankrupt, wrongfully operating criminal organizations under the United States Corporation Company or its states of operatives and entities, etc., claiming or escheating the estates of the people, including any taxation whatsoever. And these areas is what you should be dealing with and starting to study to relieve the birthright theft of the people's estates that have been actually being extorted from you under human trafficking. That's the reality. And part of the claims that they've been making jurisdictional body claims and thus later souls and organ claims, etc., which they've also been stealing people's organs under the so-called driver's license, etc., and bonding them for future death and organ transfers, etc. And they've made a business out of that too, etc., with that marriage certificate and the driver's license. So don't think that these people have anything to do with divinity. They are absolutely, positively, and provably human traffickers. That's a fact. And the perspective, the concepts that our people have had to the contrary, are actually juvenile and unfortunately naive. I think that answered the brother's questions earlier.
I guess. Let me see if there's another question. I think there was. The other part of the question was also, if we create our own jurisdiction and natural birth centers, wouldn't this solve and override any claim they have via their adhesion contract?
Of course. Now, and this is back to why over the years, although under normal circumstances, it would not be something that we would need to do because it wouldn't have been necessary. This is again why we've been promoting for years to people to start study classes in the different territories at North America, particularly, and activating the pre-existing courts of diversity that are lawfully constructed around the world. That is your consular venues to get the people into the practice and exercising of intelligent jurisprudence operations to issue from your own political venues lawfully with established law, etc., your instrumentalities to any persons, groups of persons, or anyone representing any agency claiming jurisdiction on the lives and the bodies of the people. That would include the International Monetary Fund, United States corporation operatives, the IRS, the United Nations, or any other entity which are really octopus arms of the bankrupt United States corporation company that many of its agents are still operating at North America in violation of both Constitution, violation of treaty, and violation of international law, still doing human trafficking and extorting from the people, knowing that many people don't know that they are indeed human traffickers and are actually a criminal enterprise with all of its operators, and that include all the governors, etc., who have been pretending to be officers or under constitutional operations when actually they are operatives under defunct, de facto, expired, and bankrupt United States corporation company, and still operating their pledges to the popes of Rome under the secret Treaty of Verona against a unknowing, unsuspecting, and uninformed general public. That's a fact.
All right, other comments. Okay, what is reversion of the estate and how do we?
Version of estate is basically when you rebut any claims made by the de facto operators who have been claiming to be quote unquote quote unquote, the government or your government, both of which are false statements and lies. However, it is important that you, your family members, your friends start studying and becoming competent and being in harmony with established law, etc., yourselves, and start taking control of your estate. So reversion of estate in its nature is really you claiming the birthright or claiming your right of estate. And as an example, many of you over the years, for the last 25 or 30 years, and some of you listening aren't even that old, but we've been teaching this to people for quite some time. This is what you would call a reversioner's statement in its nature. This would be the nature of a reversion of estate. As an example, if you did a writ, writ just means writing, and you would say, what is your appellation? So you would say, I, and place your appellation, the living sentient man or woman and rightful heir, am not lost at sea. And I affirm and I declare my right of, quote unquote, reversion of estate. And therefore I make no claim with respect to the title and misrepresented name or man of straw and nom de guerre being a title, which is and which consists of the all caps instruments that are presented on bills, instruments, debts, etc., or licenses, marriage licenses, all the other instrumentalities. I reject them, and the spurious, and they are the spurious creations of the foreign de facto United States corporate operatives, actors, and owners. And I surrender and assign any and all reversionary interest to the foreign United States and to its subsidiaries for full, quote unquote, acquittance, discharge, settlement, and closure, quote unquote, of my reliance on Title 12, United States Code, subcategory of subtitle 95A, Part 2. And I assume no liabilities, and I assume no debts, however contrived, among its associates, and I do not consent to, nor do I stand as surety, quote unquote, for the foreign, private, and for-profit United States Incorporated, U.S. corporation company entity owners, its directors, or their administrators or administrative clerks, nor do I stand as surety for its subsidiaries or its associates at any point or any moment in time. That would be a reversioner estate statement in general. And that would cover all false taxation, all claims of over your body, all the Christian black codes operative where they've been claiming people's children under state wardship, which is really for their human trafficking, which has been going on for quite some time, etc. So in a public record, if you make public response, the most important thing to be cognizant of in relation to reversion of estate and right of estate is that it must be proclaimed publicly. That's the major issue.
And where would one file that?
You don't need to file. We need to see the file. This is the point. People's concepts, and I comprehend that, because you're used to filing things thinking that they're legitimate. You give them what you would call notice, lawful notice. So it wouldn't be a file. That the following would be, that's how you respond to them. And you keep a record. And you make it public. That's the only.
So when they make a claim against you,
because that's what they're doing. They're making claims of a debt that is theirs, converting it to you. And then they're operating that if you don't respond or rebut that you've abandoned your estate, then they use their de facto human trafficking venues that are not Article 3 courts, but they've been telling people they're courts, and they've been actually using them to enforce false claims on people because they're making claims against your estate. Remember, when they send you any instrument that says you owe them anything, that's a claim against estate. You must make a counterclaim by rebutting their claim. You might look at like if as far as say for instance, if you're talking about proper venue, right, by which a claim should be heard, then that would be what is known as a mandamus, right? If you're rebutting their claim of authority over yourself or your estate, that would be a quo warranto. Also, it would be an averment of jurisdiction. So put these three things on your venue for study. An averment of jurisdiction, one. A mandamus, that would be relative to the venue, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, a quo warranto, and that would be a writ commanding them produce by what authority they're operating. And of course, they cannot produce it because they are really impersonating. So they will never properly answer it, which would show you that they actually never had jurisdiction. This is again why many people among you who you've been thinking wanting to help you, except claiming to be conscious, etc., will try to get in your pockets, etc., rather than tell you the truth that these people are really human traffickers, that they're defunct, and that the fundamentals with all our people, we should learn to rebut the claims of Rome. And the more your people do it, they'll not be able to sell the bonds on the stock market, which is really what they've been monetizing by our people not making their right of claim or nationalizing, and therefore assume that they've abandoned their estate and they've been building more instruments on that and sending them to Seed and Company, 55 Water Street, and backing their debt as security, their private debt, pretending to be government. The problems that they have, and as the nations of the earth have been rejecting U.S. Treasury bonds, and that's why you have this trade problems now and all this stuff that's going on. Know that that is in fact directly tied to this conversation. Directly.
Okay, here's another comment. I can't pronounce her. But anyway, marriage is a contract with the state. My mate and I tried to change our names before we knew it wasn't necessary, and was told we would have to remarry in order for him to take my L that I had.
All right, now you're talking about in personam jurisdiction. You write them a rebuttal. And this is I did a short book for people to study. It's called Nomen Substantivum. And that's to let you know that your right of claim of a name, correction, or change is a divine right and supersedes any claim made by the state. They didn't tell you that part though, did they? We'll talk about that later. That's a fact. That's law.
And because there's an instance in the Bible where I forget his name, but he changed his name because his name meant pain, and he was causing pain, and he just changed his name to something that had a different meaning.
Yeah.
So if you go to that scripture,
casting spells.
That's right. All right.
And see, even the question indicates the assumption that they have jurisdiction. You see where the psychology is? See, the deal of it is when you apply to them, you're giving them jurisdiction over your estate. They have none lawfully. However, under forfeitureship, or what you call trust law, when you assign to them, it's actually they're dealing with your estate by you just assigning them verbally to your estate by trust. That's why they don't teach trust law or trust principles, all of which our subject matter is tonight. You got to, you know how they say Satan has no power except what you give him? Translated into common civic order, the corporate state and the Roman Curia members have no jurisdiction except you keep applying to them and assuming that they have jurisdiction. Then they assume it. And then when they do, you always lose.
Okay. So, Asha says, how do you get out of rapid antigen testing from work? What instrument would I need?
You would do a reversion of a statement in the same nature.
with regard
See,
to
the deal is
testing
they're assuming
jurisdiction.
in personam jurisdiction. You would do a quo warranto. By what authority are they making their demand? And the instrument would be designed relative to the matter or the subject matter at hand. As an example, if someone says to you, you must take our, or you must drink our maple syrup in order to enter the door, right? A quo warranto would ask them by what authority they're operating so that you can make sure that you're doing right, etc., so that you can protect your rights and reserve your rights. And put it in writing. Don't do a lot of verbal talking. Put it in writing. And always name the person, not the corporation. And watch how quickly they don't put their name to it. Because they already know that as soon as they do, you can sue them. And this is back to the reestablishing of the proper political venues, i.e., the consular venues that have been silenced, particularly since 1954 by Dwight D. Eisenhower via the United States Corporation Company, because they already know that our people not being conscious of the venues of diversity of nationality, that our people would lean naively to the states, courts, etc., which are de facto human trafficking venues. And logically, ever since 1954, what they've been doing with our people, packing the prisons with them. Wrong venue. And you notice in 1954, 55, they put out all of their clergy members running around talking about civil rights since 55. Our people don't see the correlation because they're not thinking. We're getting you to think again. Don't expect us to come save you, or Jesus come save you, or Muhammad to come save you, or Zikrab to come save you, or Musa to come save you, etc., or Buddha to come save you, or Confucius come save you. You're going to save yourselves. And you're going to do it with knowledge. See, like Yeshua said, the anthropomorphic Jesus said, know you the truth, and the truth will set you free, or make you free. It's a state of mind. Once you comprehend that these Romans aren't your government, that they're actually human traffickers, and that's the same spirit. When they say Rome, they're really talking about the spirit of the evil ones who murder all the prophets and murder justice. And so when they say they hang Jesus on the cross, they hang justice on the cross. And therefore, they disallow justice to be executed among the common people. And thus, they are, or take their position that they've been operating for centuries as human traffickers, sometimes connotatively referred to as slave traders. That's what's going on. And the marriage certificate is one of their instrumentalities for trade.
So, said the Sambo says, if I want to get married, how would I do so?
If you want to get into matrimony. Now, what you want to do is you and your divine, beautiful mate, in accord with nature, make an obligation contract between you and your family, the same way you would do in ancient Africa before European colonialization. You would ask for the hand of your purported wife to the parents of that wife, show yourself competent, and in honor, basically by tradition, show dowry to show that you're not just coming for what you call a quick date, if you get the point. And then give as you take from the family, you show honor by that means. You make the honor between your family, not the corporate state. The corporate state belongs to the popes of Rome. Why would you ask the enemies of humanity and the enemies of your foreparents who've been lynching you, poisoning you, doing experiments on you? Why would you ask them for permission to do that which is yours by nature, by the divine source or divine creator?
So as Moors, the way to come into matrimony would be?
Matrimony, not marriage. Marriage
the process.
Marriage is based on the lower vibration, or what you call the war negative principle of Mars. I is the 9th letter of the alphabet, which is the I, or the 9 moons or the 9 months by which the woman or the matriarch brings life to the gates of the physical world, etc. And rage, Rage, just what it is. Rage is anger. Therefore, marriage, in the nature of the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed operatives, is a curse. Go into holy matrimony. Give marriage back to Rome. Go into your union with the proper spirit, in harmony with divine laws of nature, and respect for the matriarchy of life, the giver of life, the bringer of life, the womb of man, just like the honor of your mothers and your fathers, in harmony with nature. Get Rome out your life.
Okay, here's a question. Hi, Taj. Can you explain a bit about a Moorish passport? I am very much interested about changing my nationality to the Moorish one. How can we travel from America, the corporation? I think that means
even what has been going on under European colonial operations, which is why our people have been constricted in the first place. So the beginning of curing the problems that we've had with colonial operations, your right of travel is divine, and not by shipping bottomry instruments, which is what a passport is. For ships. Now, are you a ship, or are you a living sentient being? Thus, this is part of the work collectively that we all must do to reject Rome. Stop trying to capture the straw man. Choke it so that the instruments that they have created and sold around the world have no value, which is why, because remember, those things are traded as sureties for the United States Corporation Company. It's not your country. It's not the aggregate land. It's the private corporations of members of the crown or the Roman Curia, who has also made an agreement with all the clergy and all the politicians to send to the popes of Rome and to the crown, which includes all bar members and lawyers, 20% of all taxes collected against the Aboriginal people of North America in perpetuity. And lately, they've been doing it even to the hybrid European so-called U.S. citizens since the 30s. 20% of all tax goes to the crown and to the popes of Rome and your clergy in perpetuity by agreement of all these politicians you've been calling your mayors and governors, etc. They're not your members. And you're not members of them. They're Roman Curia members, and they've been doing this to you forever. The more you start rejecting them, they will have no power over you. The major issue why we're trying to get you active, not only at North America, but around the world, is to reject Rome, reject Rome, reject Rome, reject Rome's agents, reject Rome's Curia members, reject the barristers who comprise the crown of the circle, church, and chancery. And thus, you must reject their agents that are sent in your communities to sell you bond certificates that go to seed and company called the marriage license.
Well, with regards to travel, we had this, by the way, we had an excellent event on last Friday, a week ago, up close and personal. I want to thank everyone that might be listening that came out. It was such a wonderful opportunity to come together the way we did. But there were some who traveled, via air and so forth, and they said they used their nationality cards wherever they gotten them from, and then there were others who could not get a plane.
And this is different. These are different jurisdictional operations, and this is where people really need to understand political jurisdiction. As an example, I stopped flying on around 207. I think the last flight I took was, I think, 207 to Detroit. But I stopped flying. I want you all to, as an interim, look up Wigner's disease and Wigner's effect. Now, one of I will consider an honorable European daughter who's a scientist, and she studied under the world's most advanced and well-renowned nuclear scientist. And her name is Lorraine Mouret, and study Wigner's disease and Wigner's effect. And you'll understand why I've told many people I stopped flying in 207. However, when I used to fly on my nationality card. As Moors began to become more cognate in different political jurisdictions, they start constricting because they were losing finance and also claiming jurisdiction over the people, etc. But keep in mind that that they have contaminated the upper atmosphere with radiation, and most of the planes are actually radiated, and they can't clean them, and they're actually shortening people's lives and also making them sick, which is again why I stopped flying. And they're not going to tell you that because they don't want you to know that that was also part of their kill-off plan for what you call depopulation. So look up Wigner's disease and Wigner's effect. However, point that I'm making to you is that I used to fly with my nationality card alone by itself, and they as people.
This past
yes,
weekend.
and some people who are claiming the Jews that be Jews or not, but are not Jews, wrote an article about me around 205, 206 or something like that, and called me the Fourth World War. And so as the people started becoming more aware and flying with their nationality card, they start constricting them. Not lawfully, but under a color law. Keep that in mind. But as you all become more conscious and you start exercising your rights, their power of selling these instruments around the world, which would include marriage certificates, birth certificates, driver's license, CDLs, etc., they will have no power, because remember, Satan has no power except what you give them. And so we're not talking about the true meaning of Satan. We're talking about the connotative meaning of Satan being the negative lower self spirit that is present in the operatives of the hybrids, etc., against humanity doing negative things. And logically, human trafficking is a major part of their economic system and bonding system. So the bondage is not a chain. The bondage is these instrumentalities.
Comments.
And the same way that I read earlier, just that general statement, which is one paragraph of the Reversioner, and many of you who have the flash drive from Dr. Naila, look at the Reversioner, and that'll give you an idea. And this is the other deal, is that the politicians, the fake members of the Roman Curia, don't want the people to know, is that the United States Corporation Company and all the states of institutions, then that would include the Queen's political operation known as Canada. That would include Canada. That the debts that they've been claiming to be the people's actually belong to them, and that's where 95 subsection A is really all about. That all the debts are really the United States and not the living people, and they've been converting their private debt on to you. So you need to be aware of that. That's why I put that in the Reversioner, so that people can do the research themselves and see that these fake politicians are lying to you when they say that you owe them anything, that they're actually lying. Literally lying.
Here's a good question from Reese Marcy Ladon. Long time no hear from, sister. Does the Great Seal of Moorish Affairs have a census of all the Moors who submitted paperwork over all these years?
Over all these years with the different territories, in general, yes, but it's been pretty much loose. It's been pretty much loose.
It's not consolidated.
Yeah, not consolidated. But the real deal is the effect that it has had, that you meant, because the real purpose is that you're killing the straw man. That's the real purpose, and it's pretty much been effective. And keep in mind, any operations where the people have been operating over the years to help the people, they always, and it's never not been so, always infiltrate and always put someone in that starts disrupting. However, it didn't stop the continuous expansion and effect of killing the straw man, meaning that they interrupt, interfere, or undermine, etc. But guess what? The straw man is still being choked, which is really the mission, and is getting people to think and act, which is really the mission.
Okay. 196. What role does grammar play in regards to contracts?
Because grammar plays this role, to comprehend, understand what you're talking about would indicate competence in relationship to a writ, and a contract is a writ. And keep in mind the distinction between making a notice to someone, distinguished from applying to someone, which are opposites. A notice is an authoritative position of a being that has right of claim. An application implies someone who is subject or subordinate. And so you would not apply, you would claim a right. This is back to, must be very clear to everyone, the distinction between a birthright, or what is known as unalienable rights, and a lienable right, which is a licensed privilege. All licenses are privileges and are not rights, distinguished from rights. The right of travel exists by nature. It has been stolen by foreign European colonists, and because they're human traffickers, this is where the license comes from. That's where it has its origin. So that must be comprehended already. So when you understand grammar, you know that a license has nothing to do with right. It has to do with theft.
So Trey says, doesn't waking up require the people to go to war?
War is not always hot fire. Right now, you're in spiritual war. And you've been in it for quite some time. The deal of it is some have been aware of it and some have not. They've been warring against you, whether you've been conscious of it or not. And that you is me, you, and everyone in general. They've been waging war on you. The distinction in current affairs is that many people are now becoming conscious. And so they think stuff is starting when this stuff has been going on all the time. It's just that people are becoming more aware. And thus, things seem to be more terrible because now you're looking at the monster in the face. You're finding out the lamb was a wolf.
Here's a comment. Can Grand Sheik speak on having a license as a truck driver and the difference with non-commercial traveling?
See, the right of travel or to move your goods across the land is what is called a substantive or write this down and do this research yourself. All stare decisis or res judicata rules of the highest court, known as the Supreme Court, in relationship to quote unquote substantive rights. And you'll get that answer yourself. And that's for everyone listening. See, the major thing we want to do here or share with you at the House of Reawakening Minds is to put the responsibility back into your hands of claiming a right that already exists. And the question is certainly apropos for many people who are listening, but they must comprehend and understand and overstand and understand that our conversation with you is to encourage you to claim the right that already exists with you and to be aware of it. And that we give you nothing. We share with you information so that you can recognize that the God is within, the right is within, and it is with you from birth. And what we're doing is purging Midgard Earth of Satanist operations. That's really what's going on. And we're talking about Satan, not the planet Saturn. We're talking about the negative lower self spirits who have been governing the planet under the guise of government, when in fact they've been criminal cabal operatives, pretending to be government, and they've been doing human trafficking, which is really what we're talking about. And the masses, through their activity and consciousness, must start rejecting Rome, because you can't serve two masters. You can't serve divine source and Rome. Rome symbolizes the negative demonic spirits operating through humans, etc., on the planet. And Rome, symbolically in the modern operations, is the head of that evil on the planet. And the clergy has been their octopus arm under the guise of religion among the masses who thought they were loving Jesus. And that's the Article 3 of the Secret Treaty of Verona that I shared with you, that's in the congressional records for you all who think that the congressmen and the senators don't know that the clergy in all your little communities, all these poor communities on every other corner, they're not separate from the state. They are agents of the state. And their allegiance is not to Jesus, to Allah, to Muhammad, or to the ancient ones. Their allegiance is to the Pope of Rome, and you have been their product. That's a fact. And the marriage license has been one of their main instrumentalities for not saving souls, but collecting souls for the popes of Rome. And this is another reason why the world is in such a sorry state, because the people have not recognized that those standing behind the pulpits has been one of the major successful demons among the people, unsuspected.
Okay, here's a question. Respectfully, Sabir states we can't travel without a passport. Please expand.
Expanding is to admit that that passport is a compromise and not act like it's legitimate or that it's a success. It's a capitulation. Now that's a fact. Don't imply that it's right. So therefore, we all should be working to eliminate it, shouldn't we?
Right.
Shouldn't we? That's what should be said. In other words, like this. See, this is like this. You know, just like our people, many of our people in our families, right? Right? And this goes with and the Tusabir and others, right? Just like the corporate state steal your family's property on Catherine Street, when that should be your property, your inheritance, but they steal it under fake taxes, etc. We should be working to counter that, not capitulating to it and say, well, we can't live in a house except we pay taxes to the Rome. And see, so part of it out of ignorance is what you call consent. And the people make more effort to compromise themselves to get along. You know how they say, go along to get along? Mm-hmm. You know, like Kwame always say, go along to get along, folks. Mm-hmm. And then try to tell the next generation that their position is legitimate rather than that we've capitulated. It doesn't mean that you don't recognize that in certain circumstances that we're compromised. We recognize that. However, we should be working to fix it, shouldn't we, for the next generation, although generations before us have punked out and capitulated. Admit capitulation. That's the whole point. Don't make it sound like it's legitimate. That's my point.
Right. Now, capitulating
means that you right. You gave up.
I know what it means.
You surrendered. You're right.
I know what it means, but I was going to say in terms of what is going on today, where they're forcing folks to either, have the jab or have, some
they're opposing capitulation,
or actually have to be tested on a constant basis, which we know isn't safe in and of itself. But to capitulate would be, well, I want to go to Broadway, and I want to go to all these things, but all of these things are not only allowing fully V people.
Let's look at this.
Yeah, but I'm saying,
let's look at this.
So to do something just to be able to
now
be in that number.
Now that's the promise, right?
That's the promise.
Now hold on. That's the promise. And that's been the promise for this last year, right?
Right.
Now, show all of the free venues and all the freedom of movement that all the V people have gained after the V. Not only are they just as constricted as everyone else, they still got to wear a mask. So how do you say, if you come in here, you can come get a peanut butter sandwich if you take the V, and they're still restricted just like everyone else. And as a matter of fact, some venues in certain corporate areas, if you have the V, they don't want you in the establishment.
Yes, true.
So where's the so-called liberation? You see, it's still capitulation.
It's confusing, to say the least.
The confusion is that we're still mentally thinking that they have jurisdiction because they say you must. How many people, now look, how many people in principle, the Supreme Court is the highest law in the land, right? Right?
Yes.
That means if anyone read Article 3, Section 1, right? The judicial powers of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may establish from time to time, right? So the superior courts cannot have jurisdictional powers superior to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has said that employers have no right and cannot command that people be vaccinated in order to maintain their job. That is written. How many people respond to that, to the people who they're employed to? That's already documented. These people are already suable. How many people suing them? So how many people say, I got to do this, and they capitulate, don't they? Now they've given up some of their lives. They're walking around, many people having blood clots, dying, etc. And then after they kill them, they say, oh, they died from COVID. No, they got COVID when they got the shot. Oh, who else the truth?
Okay, let me just put this in here. Reversioners. Let me see if there's another question. Yeah, waiters. Brett Forney says, different subject, but still about them. I'm trying to figure out the source of these fires. Are they natural? If not, who would it benefit if they were unnatural?
You already know, and most people already know the real politics that's been operative, that they are known as directed energy weapons. This is why you will see some trees burning from the inside out. You'll see in certain areas, particularly in Khalifa's land area, where you see whole areas burned up and the bodies of car metal melting, turning white, and as an example, cast wheels of cars melting with plastic trash cans right near the car that didn't burn. And you'll see certain bushes next to houses that didn't burn. That's directed energy weapons. It's a known fact.
And of course, the storms that we just, and flooding we just experienced over in this area.
They've been doing that since the 40s. Those are called seeding.
Seeding,
seeding,
like
yes.
seeding the clouds.
Seeding,
and the,
yes,
okay.
Yes.
But it's not just that stuff. There's also been earthquakes, underwater earthquakes to cause tsunamis and earthquakes.
Directed energy weapons and rods of God.
Right. Yeah, look up that.
They're not new technologies, old technology. And as a matter of fact, for those of you who really know some of the old technologies of humanity on the earth, those of you, you can find some of that information in the Bhagavad Gita. the rods of God that you see today is ancient even back to them.
Yeah.
So don't see the fact that they have miseducated people, particularly at North America, have these people thinking that a lot of technologies that are being used now are modern technology, and actually it's ancient. It's just that the masses have been kept dumb as relative to what has really been going on. Like you see your flat screen TVs as an example that you have now today. They were using them in the 30s among themselves. Nothing's new. Portable phones that you have your handheld phones now, right? Uncorded, 1800s.
Earlier, you see.
They were earlier, but I'm just saying, as the hybrids have been using them here in North America, but they've been kept among the priesthood and members of the Circle Church and Chancery. This is another reason why they've had an upper hand on you, because they've been hiding technology from you. And when some of it slips out, they pretend to you that it's a new invention and it's old African technology. And so and this is another problem that the people have who really don't know about the walk of man on earth. When they think ancient Africa and ancient Hikupta, or what you call Egypt, Saba, they keep thinking just on the east side. They're not thinking North, Central, South America, and the entire planet, which is what they should be thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking ancient Egypt and you're not thinking lower Kentucky and Tennessee and the Grand Canyon, your concepts are wrong.
Here's the question from OJL. Have you heard about what Romano Didulo is doing in Canada, i.e. claiming to be the new queen and chief commander of Canada, and your thoughts on that?
I'm not up on that in detail, but in principle, I comprehend it. Because what's happening is indigenous people around the world have what you call superior right to any colonial claim. And many people are starting to exercise that right. And I suggest to all of you, start thinking in that direction. Because the right is already with you. However, when doing it, do it with competence.
Anyone who, I'm just responding to a question. If you purchased a flash drive a couple of years ago, yes, it definitely has been updated since then.
Yes, it's been updated. Yeah.
Close to 800 documents on there now. So I would say, I got one 2 years ago. You were missing a lot of information that we've updated with. Okay, here's a question from Artis Upchurch. How can you protect your pension and Social Security benefits, or not to pay taxes on your income?
Hold on. First of all, let me answer your question by going back to the issue of grammar and language. Income, the word income, applies to a foreign corporate operation in a foreign jurisdiction and does not apply to any principal investment whatsoever, but applies only to the profits generated by principal investment by a corporate entity and not a living man or woman. Your wages or compensation, pecuniary compensation received for work or labor are not income. If you say it's income, you've just misclassified yourself, and therefore, just like the adhesion contract that they trick people, you're treated as a foreign corporate entity, not a living man or woman, and thus are taxable. And so income tax is for a corporate dead entity doing business in a foreign jurisdiction.
But isn't that why they're trying to turn us into all caps.
No, they're not turning us. They're presenting.
They're presenting us,
but it doesn't turn you.
Right. No. Well, presenting us as all caps.
So therefore, you must rebut. There's back to public notice. This
Okay.
is back to proclamation.
I do not.
This is how you can't see. They keep presenting you as a non-begear straw. You must rebut it. This is where, particularly across North America, because the military operations for the Pope of Rome is launched particularly under the United States colony corporation operations, which would include Canada, but the head spear is the United States Corporation Company. You must rebut. It can't be emphasized enough. See, everything, I want you all to also go to your law books and look up and read thoroughly the word abandonment. You will find when you go, as an example, if you go into targeted communities where they so-called gentrify, like our people are always talking about, they gentrified our communities when my grandmom used to have 2 houses and we should have had a house, etc. And the city of this and the city of that and the city of that, the other, came in and gentrified our community. And now I'm living in an apartment that I can't afford when I should have had a house.
That was paid for.
If you start going into the congressional records, you start going into the city records and the clerk's records, you will see that all these so-called foreclosures would be listed under the word abandonment.
Right.
It's back to the issue of estate, and it's cheating of estate. Back to the subject matter and the title of this issue that we're talking about tonight. You're not going to be, it's sort of like getting our people to stop falling for the misdirected argument of race and prejudice that has been promoted as an engineering tool. The issue is birthright theft. The issue is cheating the people's estate. The issue is that human people, have been set as surety to back the private U.S. corporation debt under wardship tenures. That is exactly the operation. Start rebutting them by doing writs of reversion of estate. Nationalization is a reversionary statement. It absolutely is. Why do you think a lot of people, even people on our side, or claim to be so-called conscious community, avoid really getting into the details of what nationalization means and what it impairs? We're not talking about opinion. We're talking about research. Because it's a reversion of estate. It kills U.S. Treasury bonds. They don't want you to know you have that power.
But if everybody's not, sending their
you give notice.
No, if they're not putting their notice out to like those 7 locations, but they're
that's only a sample. That's the only sample. And the reason that was done is to kick off a response. It was a chess move.
Was it to let them know that we were awakened to the fact?
It's a chess move, and it was killing bonds.
How does it kill bonds?
As soon as you this is what you call law of right of inheritance or claim of estate. When an heir or beneficiary of an estate, and keep in mind, the United States Trading Company is operating as a FOFA or a trustee. It is a trust. They are subsidiary operations of what is known as the Global World Trust, operating by the Popes of Rome, where all these clergy over these years have been claiming souls for the clerk for the Pope under the guise of saving souls.
For the Lord.
Savings for the Lords of London, who are the middlemen. That's the Circle Church and Chancery. The Lords that everybody's been talking about is the Circle Church and Chancery. Fleet Street, England. This is not unknown. We've been telling people this for years. Whether they accept that fact or not, we've been telling them that. Once you start making statements publicly and start to instrument any instrumentality, I don't care how basic it is, long as it's basically clear and understandable that you're saying by your actions by your words that I am not a U.S. citizen, that I'm not a 14th Amendment citizen, that I'm not a Negro, black, or colored, that I'm more, that I'm Aboriginal. When you make statements like that and start doing your business accordingly, it kills the bond. They will never allow you to catch or capture the straw man, which is a false promise that was put out there, whether you deal with UCC 3 statements or UCC 9 financial statements. That was a promise to divert people from the fact that as soon as you start talking like this, you kill the bond. They don't want you to know you have that power. They want you to think that you want to capture the straw man and become holder in due course, which they will never allow to happen. They will never allow it to happen.
Where is the original?
With its allonges.
Right, it's got attachments.
All right, let's make this very clear to everyone. When you see people talking about becoming holder in due course by issuing a writ to the Transportation Department, as an example, or HMOs, or financial statements, or birth certificates, or marriage certificate, or any other bottomry instrument issued under the jurisdiction of the United States Corporation Company, and that you're going to become holder in due course by going through commercial processes of that's why it's called commerce. Commerce means trade, human trade trafficking, etc., which is distinct from a right claimed unalienable, because all these are alienable instrumentalities, with the promise that you're going to capture the straw man and then become holder in due course and then become executor over the estate and then have access to this bottomless pit of finance, which is what they've been promising people. Remember this, law. If one has not the original instrument with all allonges attached, that would be the record of trade with it. So that means an allonge would be all of the trade instruments, the record of all the trades with all of the movements on the CUSIC number that's also on that marriage certificate, on that Social Security, which would be attached to it, which would literally be a book on everyone. You know daggone well, even when people so-called claim the so-called birth certificate, nobody talks about allonges, do they?
No.
Of course not. Do you think they're going to talk about allonges, or do you think they're going to have these people running in circles for 2 or 3 years, which buys them time? Look how many people you see running in circles trying to capture that birth certificate. How many people can you count on both hands that captured the birth certificate and got a bottomless pit to the accounts and are writing vouchers from then on and don't no longer use fiat currency of trade or any other instrumentality of trade because all they need is their signature? Like you see a lot of so-called wealthy hybrid Europeans have been doing. They don't even carry credit cards. They use their signature, and they pretty much travel the world. That's only for the elite. But yet, by birthright, that's your right, which has been denied.
So if they go to GMEI utility and they get that list.
Yes, that's part of the allonge. Part of the allonge.
Oh, that's not the entirety of it.
It would be every trade that's made on that marriage certificate, birth certificate, including those who've given up their physical life.
Like
those
my mother.
They continue. The allonges would be all of the attached trade history attached to that original instrument. All fractionalized trade, which would be a book on everyone. So for the people who even think that they've even captured the so-called birth certificate are deluding themselves. That whole promise with the commercial acquisition of holder in due course with the captivity of the birth certificate. This is what happened to that European daughter, Trochet. I think it was a year or so ago.
No, it's been about three
about
years.
3 years.
Yeah.
She so-called perfected the UCCs and so-called thought she got control of that birth certificate, and they took her to a private ecclesiastical court and tried to hide it, tried to disappear her.
They took her to hell.
If it wasn't for the fact that so many people were conscious and becoming more and more conscious, they would have disappeared her. But let this be known. She did not get a hold of that secured instrument and become holder in due course That's a guarantee.
What about the handful that we
And
hear?
it's not her fault. That's not a charge.
But what
against
about
her.
the ones we hear who said they actually have, or are they?
How come now you hear the ones that the so-called actually have? Now hold on. Now name them, count them on your fingers, and show any instrument of this bottomless pit account where they signed their signature, and show me where they're not still using fiat or other instrumentality or some kind of cryptocurrency to trade with. Name one, including the ones that's selling the processes to people. Hold on. That's like this. Here we are, right? You got the farm now. Oh, I got a hold of the farm, right? And you got all the wheat and the corn, right? And then, but everybody's supposed to visit you, got to bring a peanut butter sandwich and bring a bushel of wheat. You don't want to see no bushel of wheat. You're trying to get rid of the ones you got. If you got access to the bottomless pit account, and they call vouchers, really, when you're supposed to be, when it boils down to it, you're supposed to be able to buy your autograph alone, transfer any right of property, because you yourself will be held as the bank based on your birthright, based on the birth certificate. And I'm not saying that that's not right, because that's morally right how things supposedly operate. But they disallow it under a color of law. That's the criminal activity that's been ongoing with the operatives of the United States Corporation Company. Therefore, people who have a right to travel, they've been forcing them to get passports. They've been forcing them to get licenses. They've been forcing them to get marriage certificates. They've been forcing them to get jabs in their arms. And the people have been cooperating rather than refuting them, haven't they? Meaning you have more who have been cooperating and less, although it's growing now, more who have been rebutting them, which is now becoming their problem with the bonds around the world, because no one's buying their treasury bonds. They're having a feedback loop, which we've been telling the people for the last 15 years. So now you have, rather than saying that the nations of the earth are no longer buying U.S. treasury bonds, they're saying that we're having a trade problem with China and India and Russia. Yeah, right. No, what's happening is that them UST bonds, backed by the private popes and clergy's Federal Reserve note, which is known as quote unquote private commercial paper, coming under the category of fiat, is not being accepted in trade around the world. So now it's becoming what you call domestically accepted and rejected outside. So now you have hyperinflation, which is what? Corporate state robbery of the people, which is what's going on now, and it's accelerating. So therefore, all of us should be about the business of restoring our right of estate, shouldn't we? That's where our efforts should be. It doesn't mean, because you're being realistic and practical, that many things we're doing now while we're in this process of transition is a compromise. Don't call it other than compromise. Don't imply it as other than compromise. But that compromission should be with the intention of correcting it for the next generation, if not for yourselves, which is what we've been saying for years.
This is, I don't know this question, but I won't put it up there because they didn't put it down here like 6 or 7 times. So I'm going to, Islam, can a nationalized father whose child's mother is Black and civil liter mortuus arrange for a de jure Moorish adoption with a competent nationalized willing quote unquote mother to have the child nationalized?
Well, see, because now this is what must be comprehensive. Let's say this from the beginning. This is for everyone in general. The nationality is a birthright.
And
process is only a formal activity to give public notice.
The child is
the consciousness itself and beginning to act on it is national. See, the deal of it is what you have is simply human beings being misclassified for the purpose of presenting them as stock and as surety for a private trading company known as the United States via its subsidiaries. Nationalization is a divine right that already exists but has been interrupted under Escheat operations. So therefore, the first principle of nationality or nationalization is consciousness. All other activities is just a formality to let the world know. See, so the honor of your mothers and fathers is divine. It's in the blood. The process is only because of what you would call the necessity of countering assumed claims that are already out there under the straw. And this is back to assumed jurisdiction that we're talking about, whether you're talking about the birth certificates, the marriage certificate, or other instrumentalities that the corporate operatives of the corporate state are claiming to own your rights or your body or your estate or your liberties, and thus they are FOFR, and that all entries into the Sister QV trust must be made through them, as the being is held as a ward or state ward and incompetent, also known as a minority. You know, so when one understands what these grammars mean, you consciously counter them.
So here's a question again. I'm thinking from the same person who asked about the pension.
The pensions are gone. Let's
right,
start
but
with that.
as it is, though, if they're still going to give them something saying the pension and Social Security benefits, what documents are needed, and who will I submit it to? Isn't that old business?
That's old business.
And
take
you
care
leave
of it.
in your
They
old
already take care of that business because it's a corporate entity.
in your straw.
They already have that.
So just don't fool with that.
And it's not your straw. That is
I
the
said in the straw that they create.
Remember, the Sister QV trust is what they're operating on. They're operating on via contract. The deal of this, in fact, the pensions are gone. This is again why they're doing the stimulus, to cover up the fact so that the public don't come after their necks. And I don't mean next, N-E-X-T. I mean N-E-C-K-S.
Next.
Because the last large financial operations of the United States corporation company that they had control of is the Federal Employees Retirement Pension Fund. That's gone. So if you're talking about thinking long term with the so-called pension, don't hold your breath. So we all need to be about the business of restoring the estates. All of us. Reversion of estate is part of nationalization. And when you nationalize, that's already implied politically. They know it, even though people who nationalize don't know it. This is another reason why you see so many people talking against it, who really know the effect that it has. You know, someone who knows the effect of it are very sensitive. That's why they are, because it's killing the stock market. And the masses don't know that it's tied directly to the stock market. They think that the products that are produced, the cars and everything like that, are really what affect the stock market. No, they're reflections. The trade of material goods is a reflection of the bonds that back all of that trade up, which are marriage certificates, birth certificates, etc. Human trafficking.
But what is their expectation, has been their expectation all along, or what have they received and gained as a result of using birth certificates and marriage? No, what have they how have they gained materially based on putting us under their,
This is what has gained. Remember, the fiat categorized instruments, which is not limited to federal private commercial paper. That's the lawful term for what you call Federal Reserve notes, debt notes, etc. It's the marriage certificates and all the other instrumentalities. It has allowed them to steal people's estate and labor under the guise of paying them when they've never paid them. But because the people believe they were getting paid, the value is psychological. It is based on trust and blind faith. And that's all. Once that leaves, it dies. However, in the process, it has allowed them to escheat your estates. As an example, and this is fact. This is fact. This is fact. The Federal Reserve Board, who are members of the Roman Curia, who are answerable to the Board of Trustees, known as the Congress and the Senate for the United States Corporation Company, to the Circle Church and Chancery members, that would be the lawyers, attorneys, and esquire, who are answerable to the Queen of England and the Lords of London, etc., which will include many of those members, who are answerable to the Pope, who controls the global world trust, which is peopled with what is known as Sister QV trust, that are instrumentalities that represent the owned souls of every human being on earth, claimed by the Pope of Rome under the Spanish Inquisition. So what it is they have been stealing the resources of the world by simply printing private owned vouchers known as Federal Reserve notes that go into the reserve of other nation states that buy U.S. Treasury bonds. So they've been getting all material goods for absolutely nothing and making you work for it, and then lighting cigars with $100 bills, and you're thinking they're rich. No, that's candy wrapper paper for them, but it's money for you only. Then they go with suitcases to different districts. As an example, Wilmington, Delaware, as an example. They will go to someone like Senator J.B. years ago and put a briefcase full of Federal Reserve notes. He will designate through Chase Bank or some other area, and they will go in targeted neighborhoods and buy up property for nothing. What they bought is the labor and the estates of people for generations. That's the benefit. They've been getting something for nothing. They've been stealing or cheating people's estates with Federal Reserve notes, which are nothing more than printed trash coming from the dump with ink on it that has no backing whatsoever, but has the full faith and trust of an ignorant people who don't know that they're under occupation, and they have lost their estates for generations under Escheat. And they're sitting around talking about whether there's gold or silver and don't even understand. That's part of the argument, but it isn't the issue, never was. They're still under the illusion that these people are their government. They're still under the illusion that the United States is the country. They're still under the illusion that the agent members of the different agencies have authority to tell them to do this, that, or the other, including take a jab in their arm. And they've been cooperating, giving up their estate, and that's called abandonment of estate, and it's also called consent. And that's what's been going on. We're trying to get them to start using their intelligence and recognize that the hybrid Satanists have no power except what we keep giving them. And this is what happens when you have conscious people over the years who have been trying to help the people. They would murder them to coerce the rest of the people to keep consenting to what is a known fraud. And then they keep saying, they made me do this, they made me do that. Well, that's a yes and a no at the same time. We keep consenting. And then we keep following what you call people of color, which are usually called Black Negro leaders, who keep telling these people, well, you can't eat the sandwich unless you consent. They're encouraging the ignorance without explanation, sending it to the next generation. This is what has happened. And so until the people stop serving Rome or giving Rome authority that they do not have, that they never had, it's a matter of trust. It's not a matter of authority. It's a matter of trust law. As soon as you apply to them, you have applied or said they are your or they are your fofer. Now, this is back to the grammar.
What's a fofer?
A fofer is a feudal word for a trustee. And that's what they've been operating on. Or they've been calling them white man, which also means fofer, trustee, and ruler of the land. It does not mean complexion. Then they've been exercising that authority that we keep giving them. Then we want to march around the place and complain because we don't know what the hell we're talking about. And we keep following compromised so-called black people who are compromised and don't want to fight back, which is why they keep capitulating, which trains the next generation rather than put up a fight, except when they're out of a job and Rome wants to send them to some other African country or island to fight against their own people, to steal from them like they've been robbed. This is what's been going on. And they don't want to take the responsibility or the charge that this man has power, because we have a bunch of compromised people who won't admit that they're compromised, who keep empowering the hybrid Europeans, and he keeps exercising that power as the white sovereign man of earth, which is what that means. Does not mean Caucasian race, does not mean pale people. It means sovereign. Now that's the fact. And so we're trying to inform our people and encourage them to start taking responsibility to make public reversion of a state, to kill the bond instruments, which is the source of their power. Keep in mind, the fiat has the power of trade because the people keep believing in it. However, it is apparent that the movement that's happening at Midgard is that the world are rejecting them. And the deal of this is that they're taking that private commercial paper of the U.S. Treasury bonds out of their reserve, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
And so the nations of the world are doing what we should have been doing.
Yes, they are.
And so since we wouldn't claim the births, a few have, we've also been encouraging other people around the world. They're watching us while we speak. And they know that there's a bunch of compromised people among us. They know that. However, the world is moving on it now. And so it doesn't matter with the compromised people that we have among us. It's only a matter of time that what? The whole system of the straw and non-the-gear is collapsing. And so the people can act if they want to, or they can choose not to. However, the less knowledge they have and the less propensity and activity that we have consciously among themselves, the less probable that they may survive this thing. And that's the reality. That's not an opinion, that's a reality. That's a mathematical reality. And so there's going to be a lot of sickness and death because the people keep on what? Capitulating. It's called consent.
Is there any more comments, questions? Let me see. Okay, here's a question. Can we not own our own straw man since the government owes the people a benefit because it is insolvency?
See, the deal of it is they're insolvent, so what can they give you? That's number one. You're answering your own question on multiple levels. What we can do is claim our estate. See, this is what's really been happening. Keep in mind all the wealth that has been robbed of the Moors since particularly accelerating after they kidnapped the last African pope of the original popes. We're not talking about the hybrids thereafter, during the Napoleonic Wars, etc., and been stealing the estates of the world. Keep in mind that a lot of the gold, much more than people ever imagined, has been stored in tunnels beneath the Vatican and other places. There's more than enough wealth for every man, woman, and child on the earth. There's a mental dependency that our people have in Roman operatives, which is why the compromised people among us still call them sovereign. They will not call them hybrid Europeans. They'll call them white man. They keep giving him power. However, the rest of the world is rejecting them, and their platforms are being dismantled by necessity, because the nations of the earth have been injured. And while many of the Moors here in North America are active, you have a lot of them who are compromised and who insist on maintaining that compromised position. However, the world is moving out and around them, and it doesn't matter their compromission, because they're going to be what you would call inflated out of their possessions. While they're taking their passive position, they're going to be inflated out of all their possessions. However, before all that takes place, things are going to collapse, and then by default, a few, even some of the hybrid Europeans, will be trying to help restore the estates, reversion of estate of the people, with the general mission of actually even saving themselves. Meaning that to save themselves, they're going to have to start telling the truth. And the poverty, remember this, the poverty exists that everybody fears is absolutely artificial. See, people are fearing how we're going to eat tomorrow type thing. You know, because there's that psychology that, quote unquote, the people who have been operating is their government, and they're in a dependency mind by both their so-called educational tools, etc. And so they're in a subordinated mind. And so this is why you only have a handful of men and women that ever have the courage to actually fight back to Rome. However, all it takes is a small percentage to start maintaining the truth and keep pushing the truth. And the systems, by virtue of nature, will start collapsing, because then Mother Nature steps in. Or what you would call the divine source, or all universal law, by whatever name you want to call the divine source. See, until we collectively start rejecting Rome rules. And this is back to where Dr. Naila, I've always said over the years, our people always claim they love Jesus, God, Allah, Yahweh, all this stuff. No, they don't. Rome is their God. They won't buy or sell without a license from him. Yeah. And whenever they talk about exercising right, the first thing comes in their mind: he won't let me move unless I pay him. He won't let me have my children unless I pay him. He won't let me cut hair unless I pay him. He won't let me braid my daughter's hair unless I pay him. He won't let me go across the street unless I pay him. That's their mentality. See, remember, most of that is mental. It's not real. But it's become our reality. It's called black culture, or quote unquote dead culture. And we have what? Cultivated it among ourselves. Our problem is that we're trying to get those who have courage or guts, and it's only a handful among us, to go with the rest of the civilized world and start rejecting Rome and stop trying to serve two masters. That's all it is. It really boils down to simply that. Because he has no power except what we keep giving him. In a political term, it's called they have no jurisdiction except that we give it to them. What is jurisdiction? The power to act, the power to do, authorized by consent of the governed.
We have two questions. Let me see. Here's one. I'm going to go. Oh, it's the same one. From Rico Vasquez. If I am Aboriginal from the Atlantic Islands, Bahamas, and would like to nationalize, how can I nationalize if I'm under a different constitution?
The principles of a constitution actually are universal. The principles, keep that in mind. The written instrumentality may be distinct to different political jurisdictions, but the principles behind that are ancient. And your different and keep in mind, all of the Bahamas, or what you call any of the aggregate land from Chile to America, what is known as Americana, which is all of the islands of America. All of that is the Moorish Empire. To North America, to Greenland, all of it is. So all you have to do is start making your claim. See, the deal of it is,
I guess when they do the same paperwork or
the principle can be the same. See, the nature, this is back to reversionary principle. They must know the absence of it has been one source. The operators and owners of foreign Europeans governing the territories known as the U.S. Corporation and Canada. Those are the culprits. You eliminate them, you've eliminated the problems of all America. All America's problems. Eliminate them, you've eliminated your problem. It's called decolonization. Multifaceted.
here's a question.
Let's
Please.
go also, let's go.
Can I give you this one last question? If you, please, they want you to address, Max says, please address the door knockers of the jab. Isn't it unlawful to ask of someone's status?
It's unlawful for them to even interchange with you with any sense of authority whatsoever. And for some of others here, let's just read the first paragraph of the United States Congressional Record. And this is back to the CEO known as Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Speaker, this is in 1993 on the floor of the House of Representatives. And this is James Traficant, representative for the state of Ohio in receivership, addressing the House of Representatives for the United States. Mr. Speaker, we are here now in Chapter 11. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity. Bankrupt entity. Bankrupt entity in world history. The U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some who say it is a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. It is an established fact. It is an established fact. It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March the 9th, 1933, 48 Statute 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session, June the 5th, 1933, joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and to abrogate the gold clause, dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and dissolved all the official capacities of all United States governmental officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. Exists in name only. Exists in name only. What more do you need to understand what you're dealing with? That these people are imposters. They've been robbing you and taxing you unlawfully. They are insolvent.
So now they're trying
and de facto.
to take everybody out with them.
And we keep cooperating instead of clearing our birthright. And paying them for rights of travel that they don't have any authority over. So we keep giving it to them. But our people won't take the time to do a quo warranto when these people make demands, do they? Because nobody's telling them to do that. They're telling them to capitulate, which gives them, they've been buying time with ignorant and compromised people and then imposing it on the rest of us through force of arms. So the world is stepping in and stop buying the bonds. You see what's happening on the world trade? That's called a feedback loop. That's why all the banks have what you call zero or negative interest rates, because it can't go any lower. Now, this is back to the congressional records, you all. Please pay attention. This is not opinion. This is documented congressional record. It is an established fact that we must comprehend the distinction between real money and paper money substitute. One cannot get rich by accumulating money substitutes. One can only get deeper in debt. We, the people, no longer have any quote unquote money. Most Americans have not been paid any money for a very long time, perhaps not in their entire lives. Now do you comprehend why you are and why you feel broke? Now do you understand why you are bankrupt along with the rest of the country? Federal Reserve notes, known as FRNs, are unsigned checks written on a closed account. Repeat, Federal Reserve notes, known as FRNs, are unsigned checks written on a closed account. Federal Reserve notes are an inflatable paper system designed to create debt through inflation, which is devaluation of currency. Whenever there's an increase in the supply of money substitute in the economy without a corresponding increase in the gold and silver backing, inflation occurs. Inflation is an invisible form of taxation that irresponsible governments inflict on their citizens. The Federal Reserve Bank, who controls the supply and the movement of Federal Reserve notes, has everybody fooled. They have access to an unlimited supply of Federal Reserve notes, paying only for the printing cost of what they need. Federal Reserve notes are nothing more than promissory notes for U.S. Treasury securities, known as T-bills, a promise to pay the debt of the federal or to the Federal Reserve banks. There is a fundamental difference between paying, quote unquote, and discharging a debt. To pay a debt, you must pay with value or substance, i.e., you must pay with gold or silver or barter or a commodity. With Federal Reserve notes, you can only discharge a debt. You cannot pay a debt with a debt currency system. You cannot service a debt with a currency that has no backing in value or substance. No contract in common law is valid unless it involves an exchange of good and valuable consideration. Unpayable debt transfers power and control to the sovereign power structure that has no interest in money, has no interest in law, has no interest in equity, has no interest in justice, because they have so much wealth already by virtue of the fiat. That's congressional records. What more do we need to say to you to stop consenting? Anyway, thank you for sharing this evening with us at the House of Reawakening Minds.
You can talk about your t-shirt because they can see your t-shirt on the picture. They don't see you, but they see the picture.
See my t-shirt for the House of Reawakening Minds.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway,
we'll be making those available soon.
Yes.
Those who were here, many of you who were here on last Friday got your, not only that shirt, but our the Blood Don't Lie People Do T-shirt, which is another other. We have 2 T-shirts coming out, so we'll be putting that up very soon so that you can order your T-shirts.
Anyway, so tune in also. Tune in also, you all. Your continued support of the House of Reawakening Minds is greatly appreciated. And many of you who have been supporting us, in spite of the infiltration and the compromised people that have been sent around us, we thank you anyway for helping, etc. So we can appreciate your continued support of the House of Reawakening Minds, and it's greatly appreciated. You can do so via PayPal.me, Naila Gilliam, Cash.me, $Reawaken. Checks and money orders payable to the House of Reawakening Minds can be sent to 602 Vandiver Avenue, Wilmington, Delaware Republic, zip exempt 19802. And also, many thanks to all of you who subscribe to Dr. G's new YouTube channel. Dr. G is official, and she has reached her goal of 1,000 plus subscribers needed in order to go live. So stay tuned, because we have a lot of good people coming on board, sharing with us their disciplines that in past generations has been suppressed, that are put in place and that are being restored to help uplift fallen humanity, etc. So we have a lot of good-hearted, not selfish people who are helping, and we thank them for coming on that new channel, etc., which we'll be talking about a lot of things, holistic, etc. And so stay tuned. Dr. G is lining up great guests for her exciting new metaphysical and healthy lifestyle channel. And many of you have already experienced some of that already. So we thank you and trust that we've helped some of you. And also, I want to also give a shout out to good friends who have been sharing information with us, and some of more other information and history we'll be sharing for you. So shout out to Atiti too. So we ain't forgot you, girl. We love you. And for all of you who have been striving to help in the great missionary work of uplifting fallen humanity, props go out to you. And many of you unheralded or unsung heroes out there who've been helping along the way to uplift fallen humanity. I say with that, have a grand evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you for tolerating our camera. I can see the camera here. I can see you on camera here, but for some reason it was not connecting. So we will get this figured out to see what was wrong. We thank you for your patience and your tolerance. I know some of the audio was off, because when we clicked to try to get the camera right, it took the audio off. So we just went with, a picture. I had to get me off and get Sheik on there.
It's called censorship.
Yeah. Well, we did it. It happened. It's something happened in the camera. So I don't know if they're tampering with it or not.
It ain't been happening, has it?
I know, but we certainly do appreciate each and every one of you. And again, we have another event coming up. We'll be stay tuned for more information, but details. It's going to be on October 29th. And then we have another great holistic event the following day on the 30th with practitioners and so forth. That'll be coming, all kinds of things that you can experience on the 30th. But stay tuned for information for those that you didn't get, who were not able to come to the last up close and personal October. Mark your calendar for October 29th. We'll be back. It's going to be a little different for the next one. We actually have a topic, and we think it's a very good and timely topic that we want to discuss, and we'll have some folks along with us that'll be able to that'll be able to add to the discussion. So again, we look forward. We appreciate all of you, each and every one of you, especially those who came last week. It was a blast. Okay, so until I guess next Tuesday when I show back up, we're out of here.
The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening.